right. Hello, welcome. My name is Vadim Bauer. I'm software engineer and maintainer of the CNCF project called Harbor. I work in this container ecosystem space since around more than 10 years, maintaining Harbor, but also working on commercial side of container registries. Today, I would like to talk about the area of dealing with agentic workflows and agentic workloads in open source projects. And I'm sharing my experience that we have made over the last month with agentic workflows with you. So I want to show what is the reality of in our project. And then what is the value shift that needs to happen in the open source ecosystem to be able to sustain the status quo? What are the coping strategies that other projects are trying out, and what I think we should do instead, and what are the strategies we are deriving for the project Harbor from this, and then some closing thoughts about where I see the whole ecosystem moving. All right, let's get started. I called it a survival guide a couple of months ago, and I was a bit wrong with the naming, because the survival guide has a misleading connotation, right? It's kind of expecting you land on a deserted island, your plane crash, and then you spend a couple of weeks with your volleyball there, and then you go back home and everything is going to be normal again. The reality is that nothing is going to be normal again, right? So there is not going to be way back, and that's why the name survival is a bit wrong here. It should be rather adoption or coping strategies. So let's get started. So if you don't know, Project Harbor is a CNCF project, a fairly popular one, and it's a container registry, and it adds a lot of features around container registries, or the basic image push and pull, like image signing, vulnerability scanning, user access management, all that stuff around what you need in a normal organization is in the project. And as I said, it's a fairly popular project. It is ranked somewhere in the middle between other popular projects. So we get a lot of traction and engagement from the community, and also attention. So how does the reality in Project Harbor look like today? So I'm not sure if you can see it in detail, but when you look at the PRs or issues that we have here, you see there's a little pill there, which tells I'm not sure if you can see this. Oh no, it's black, so wrong. So there's a little pill that says first time contributions. And if you look through that, you see that 80% of the PRs are first time contributions. And the same goes for the issues. You see in the structure how the issues are written with the same pattern, same style, that they're all generated with AI. And you also see that each issue that was raised has surprisingly a PR attached to it. And this goes on and on and on. This is a different project within Harbor. You see a lot of first-time contributors. This is Harbor itself. You see there is someone dumped 5-6 PRs in the hour, right? So minutes apart. And so you see that we deal with a lot of PRs and issues in a project, and you can also see it in the statistics. So we have the Linux Foundation has the statistics, and you can see it in the active contributions going up. You see it in the pull requests going up. You see it in all the metrics going up, and you also see that the issue resolution is going up as well. So what have changed, I would say, in the last year is that we went from 1 or 2 new issues per day to 5 to 10 issues per day. We went from 1 or 2 external PR contributions, so external means outside of the contributor and maintainer, to 1 or 2 per day. The same goes for the vulnerability disclosures that we get on a private channel. So this was about a few per year, maybe like 2, 3, 4, 5 per year max, and now we get 2 per week, right? And this, as you probably know yourself, it's really difficult to distinguish between a good PR and a good PR that is written with AI, right? So it's really difficult to distinguish those two, and you need to take a lot of time to cope with that. And so you need more time to review things, even when we are using AI tools as well, of course. But still, the amount that we get more cannot be compensated with AI. So the consequence is we have too many PRs and issues to cope with. That's the reality. And now comes the question, like, how should we deal with that? And there are some different strategies. But before we dive into that, we need to understand a bit the value proposition of open source. So what is the value proposition of open source back in the day? And there's an incomplete list here. I mean, the first and foremost important part that was in open source was the shared engineering economics, because engineers are expensive, they're slow, so we need to put a lot of them together so they can create something, right? And so this was a very, very important part in the past. As you guess, it's not so important anymore. So you get a kind of distribution of costs. You can distribute your software freely. It's easy to adopt, easy to use. It's easy go to market, so for business. The networking effect in the ecosystem is important, like community, the trust and transparency that is a consequence of all the other steps before. And as you can see, there's a ranking here, and I just ranked it myself here, but the shared engineering economics was the major driver. I mean, you could get away with a shitty community for decades, you know, and Linux is a good prime example for that. For decades, the community was not, let's say, welcoming, and it's one of the greatest projects probably in the human history or humankind, right? And so you could get away with a lot of things on number 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? As long as number 1 was there. And I think, as you can guess, it is changing now, right? So we need to change the value proposition now, because the shared engineering economics, right, is not that valuable anymore. So the other pillars need to compensate that, right? So there is one important thing that was also prominent in the open source ecosystem is this authorship is equal maintainership. So if you write the code, you become the maintainer, right? So, and if you're writing code, you are the maintainer. And I think in the future, this will change, because those who are maintaining the projects will not be the one who are writing the projects, right? So, and the reality is that the writing capacity today is much higher than the review capacity, you know, despite the use of AI. So we need to go in a different direction. So we need to compensate for this engineering part with a better governance, better community, better curation, human judgment, that then altogether leads to better trust, and then trust in people to adopt the software, and also trust for people to contribute to the software, right? Because this trust is for contribution and also usage. Yeah, so we have an abundance of code. Everyone can contribute and write code. There is an interesting perspective that says, like, you know, forking becomes trivial, and we see it as well in our projects and in everywhere, right? So forking is something that was not very welcoming back in the days, and nowadays it's more common. The foundations, they're trying to work towards the stewardship model, right? They say, like, if it's in a community, in the Linux Foundation or CNCF, it is trusted, the stewardship, and there's someone's taking care. This is like where they try to adopt this shift there, or cope with the shift. In the wild, there are, of course, a lot of different projects, a lot of different strategies to cope with that. I'm just writing a few downs here. Like, one typical that I see, or not typical, but a few times I've seen that, is like banning AI PRs. Like, just we ban it, no AI in our project. You need to expose PRs that are AI generated or assisted. You can even disable PRs, right? There's also some projects that disable PRs for external contributors. Ignore it. this is what we do. You can create guidelines and rules and ban bad AI actors. There is also the strategy to have a vouching system where you trust some people more than others if they do something, right? And this is, but as you can guess, all the strategies, they're not resulting in less PRs. You know, some of the strategies even result in more PRs. So what should we do instead? And this is my personal opinion. Of course, we need to have guidelines and rules for humans and AIs. I mean, a lot of open source projects are already much mature in that regard, but still, we need to more to go there. So we need to have more tests. A typical answer, right? More tests, but we need also more tests on the low level and a high level. I mean, we should also have tests against the roadmap, tests against the scope, like test against the high level goals of the project, and not just unit tests. A clear roadmap helps direct the community and directs and rejects PR that are not in scope. Also narrowing the scope down, like and communicating the scope and saying like, this is the project, this is what it does, and it does nothing else. And if you do want something else, you have to do it on the side, you have to do a side project or whatever, right? So this is like also the strategy where you cut things and reduce the scope of the project or narrow it down. Now, one other thing is that we need to change the software architecture of the projects to be able to be more AI friendly, and I'll go into that a bit more. The whole maintainer onboarding needs to change as well. Like, how do we should not treat maintainer as code writer or code owner. We should treat maintainer as something, as a community builder, community orchestrator, and roadmap designer kind of thing. Then the knowledge transfer part, this is a bit of interesting because it's with the AI topic. So this is back from my university times many years ago. And there's like 3 types of knowledge. And one is the explicit knowledge. That's very good for AI. You can document things. Then there's the implicit knowledge. That is like experience. And then there is like the technical knowledge. And when we try to onboard maintainers and become maintainers, we are mostly operating on this 2nd or 3rd level. Yeah. So this is something where AI is not able to compensate for, right? So we need to take this into account when we try to onboard maintainers. There's a lot of tactical and implicit knowledge in there to become a maintainer. It's not about the coding and documentation. It's more. So what are the challenges in being able to solve this? And I think one of the challenges is that most developers, they want to code. So this is what they're paid for, right? So most developers want to code, and this means when code becomes not so important, developers become not so important as well, right? And then the other challenge is that because code is not the central part of this community and ecosystem, other things become more important. And one of the other important parts is like communication and collaboration. And I think we know that developers are very good at communicating, right? So there's like big problem here that we need to cope with, and we need. And I think this leads also to the consequence that we need a new generation of maintainers, those who are not focusing on code and focusing more on collaboration, communication, and direction of projects, and not just on the code part. And of course, we need more maintainers and not less. And from this, we have derived a few ideas for our project. And the reality is we cannot cope with this many PRs. No matter if we use AI tools and use assistant tools, there will be always more on the producing side than on the consuming side or on the working side. So what we currently do is we ignore a lot of those PRs. We try to build rules and guidelines on code authorship, how to direct this whole AI contributions. Of course, we try to enforce the rules with unit tests and all that stuff, and automation with agents. Agents review the code and all this stuff. So we're doing that a lot, and this really helps a lot. And I think I would this alone, back in the day, would be perfect, right? It would be super easy life if we would have these tools back in the day, but nobody else, right? So then we would be super happy with maintaining the project. But the problem is that the other side have also the tools, and they're creating more PRs, more issues, more automated. So they just dump stuff from their logs into issues and let the AI write a nice issue summary, right? So there's a lot of things we cannot cope with. On the architectural side of the software, I think this is also where our project needs to change. We need to make the code, I mean, it's kind of a typical phrase, yeah. I mean, we need to make the code easier to maintain, right? But this time, really, we really need to make the code easier to maintain. This time for sure. No, but we need to really change the software in a way to make it easier to extend, to adapt, to build, for agents to build upon, and also for agents to understand that if you have a really convoluted and complex pipeline, the agent will start hallucinate and they will produce a wrong PR, and this means you need to cope with that as well. So there is also a lot of things that need to be done on the architectural side. And also something that like open source communities are not very keen on is having metrics and analytics, right? I think this is also important to even know how much of the features are actually used in the project in the wild, right? So as an open source project, we don't know this exactly. We have a guess based on the issues and problems that arise, but sometimes there are no problems and there is no issues, and you don't know, is it because it is just working and nobody's complaining, or is it because nobody's using it and that's why nobody's complaining, right? So there's like all these areas, and I think we need to also have the kind of a metrics and analytics part in open source to be able to know what is actually used and how is it used in the community, because we cannot accept all the PRs, we cannot accept all the features, so we need to narrow it down and give it a direction, because otherwise it becomes unmaintainable. There's a nice old saying, show me who your friends are and I tell you who you are. And I think this can also relate to code or agents. And I really mean it like this, show me your prompt and I tell you who you are, because the prompt tells more about the author than the outcome. And it also tells more about the intention and the motivation than the outcome itself, right? And I think for us, for our projects, it becomes less and less important to have feature PRs, because we have the same tools, we have the same knowledge or even more knowledge about the internals of the projects, so we can create and generate those feature PRs even better than everyone else, right? So what we need to have more context, more background information, and more joint information about who else does need this feature. Is it just one person, one company who needs it, or is it a whole ecosystem, a community who needs something like this, right? And it's sometimes really difficult to make this decision because we don't know. So that's why it's important to expose the business requirements and not just feature requests. What is the reason why you need this, and do others need it as well? Also on the contributor side, right? So we need to treat contributors as maintainers, right? We need to delegate some of the contributors' work to the contributors back and say, like, you're now responsible for that. So delegate the work, making feature flags, making people responsible for their contributions, and making them responsible for their contributions over a long time, right? And this means like a feature flags, for example. This is something that would allow this. Also, make projects easier to fork, right? So if a project is easy to fork, people can fork it, can build their own features, and be happy with that. And if this is something relevant or becomes relevant, this can go back upstream, right? And that's also an important part, in my opinion, to make it really easy to fork, because this also reduces the load of PRs and issues to the project. So what we want to do is feature flags. I think this is a really important functionality for the project. Treat users as testers, so we should be able to release features behind feature flags and let people test it and try it out and provide the feedback to us. And also distinguish between a stable core and a loose surrounding. So basically the stable core is where images get pushed and pulled. All these parts should be really solid, but all the other parts that are maybe on the side, that are behind feature flags, they can break, and it's okay if it's breaks in a release, and if you don't need it, you can disable it. It's kind of optional. The maintainer onboarding is currently really difficult. I think we're not the only project with that. So it should become easier and more attractive to become maintainer and of the project. And yeah, that's what I think what we should do in our project. And as a closing thought, I think the whole open source ecosystem will be heavily impacted by these agentic workflows. I think there are some different scenarios how it will work out, but I think there's like new projects will have much harder to become popular, and old established projects will prevail and will become impossible to get rid of, also in a positive and also in a negative way, right? So there will be this divide for new projects impossible to come up, and on the other hand, like the old huge projects never decommissioned because all the agents use it, and there's like and there will be maybe less things in between. And this is like, I think it's not a good thing if we have a kind of an ecosystem of unknown projects and an ecosystem of a few very known and popular projects and nothing in between. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you.